Pop Cult Pod.
Welcome to the Pop Cult Pod, where we're crazy for film, television, video games, and much, much more. Live from the Pop Cult compound. I am your cult leader, Tompott. I'm your host. And dare I say, I'm not bad on the eyes either. A lot of news, so let's get straight into it with our Cool 8. Let's drink it up. First of all, we have news on a World War Z sequel, and it is dead. And I do mean not living dead. It's done for, from the sound of it. The Playlist.net has reported that Paramount has pulled the plug on the sequel, which most recently had David Fincher attached, which was to the surprise of most people, I think. What they were saying was that the budget was a bit of an issue. They just thought it was too expensive now. Remember, Paramount, first of all, as a studio, they don't put out as many movies as some of the other major studios. And the first World War Z was very costly because of reshoots and that kind of thing. So maybe that gave them a bit of cold feet. So the speculation behind this, one of the main reasons, is that with the money they are going to spend on the two Mission Impossible sequels that they just greenlit, this seemed like not as worthy, because it seems like that's one of their big franchises at the moment, the Mission Impossible movies. So they hadn't really committed to the movie. They've had on the cards for a while. It seemed like they kept pushing it back, but for now, at least it seems to be gone for good, and I don't particularly care. I think that's what a lot of people probably feel. World War Z, I saw the first one in cinemas. I don't really remember much about that. I know Brad Pitt drank like Pepsi from a machine at the end of it. Yeah, that's literally all I remember from that movie. Yeah, no, that silence was me trying to think. I can't think of anything else in that movie, which is probably not a good sign. I think it was apparent, like a lot of people had a bit of interest to see, because obviously David Fincher is a pretty high caliber filmmaker to have on a World War Z sequel of most things. But what it sounds like was, since it was Brad Pitt being in it and producing World War Z, he was able to get Fincher on board. But at least for now, the movie isn't going anywhere. I'm going to try to link all my Cool 8 stories as well, because I tried to do that last week, but it might be a bit torturous this week. I don't know. Let me think how we can link this. Okay, in former directors who made an Alien movie, James Cameron. Get it? Because Fincher made Alien 3 and James Cameron made Aliens. No? Okay. James Cameron is talking about Terminator 6 or Terminator 3 the third time? Whatever it is, but we do have a working title, which is Terminator Dark Fate, which is pretty generic sounding. Putting dark in the title is always kind of a lazy move. I'm sorry, I thought a lot of people they would have gone with No Fate, because of course in the original Terminator movies they have like, there's no fate but what you make for yourself, but I guess no Fate doesn't exactly sound, that just sounds like some sort of emo band. But anyway, Dark Fate isn't much better. And he did an interview with Yahoo. He said Tim Miller is definitely leading the charge here, but because he has his own ideas, but of course James Cameron is overseeing it. He said they're dealing with time and tragic futures with Sarah Connor, and that it's hardened her even more, that in a way that's made her stronger. I mean, if she's hardened, like, are we going to act like she wasn't really hardened in Terminator 2? How much harder can you get? She was a nutcase in that movie. I don't know, he's talking a really big game as far as strong female characters. He really went after Wonder Woman last year, so he's really got to deliver, and we shall see how that works out. Ultimately, she becomes a really important character. This is still talking about Sarah Connor, and passing the baton to the new characters that come in. It's a very female-centric film, which I'm glad Tim embraced those themes. So, as again, he's doubling down on this strong female character, so he really better deliver on it. Schwarzenegger is back, of course, as we already know. He's coming back as the T-800. I think I've seen him listed as the T-800 Model 101, so I assume it's like the original one, which makes sense. I don't know if it's, I assume it's not going to be the one from Terminator 2, because we saw him get melted. So, sure, there could be time travel shenanigans there. He's also going to be the human basis for the T-800, which I think was in a deleted scene of the actual Terminator 3 at one point. And he's obviously joining Linda Hamilton, who's returning back, Mackenzie Davis and Gabriel Luna, who's playing a new Terminator. The film is set to come out early November, late October. Now, it's very hard to get excited for a Terminator movie. It's probably the closest I've gotten. If only because James Cameron as well, but he gave the last one his thumbs up with a shit-eating grin, I'm sure, as he cashed his checks. And I looked at the writers for this movie, and it doesn't it doesn't really help. So, story credit is going to David Ellison, who's the CEO of Skydance. who's making this film, so a bit weird to get him involved. I think James Cameron's getting story credit. Obviously, Tim Meadows getting story credit. The screenplay writing credits. There's a lot of writers in this, and generally speaking, when there's a lot of writers on a movie, it's not a great sign. So we shall see. We have Josh Friedman, who's probably one of the standouts. He actually worked on the Sarah Connor Chronicles, which according to most fans of Terminator was like the best continuation of this story. I haven't actually seen it personally. Billy Ray, which sounds like a made up name. He's written for Overlord, that came out recently, The Hunger Games, Captain Phillips, and The Last Tycoon, which I heard the show The Last Tycoon wasn't great, but the rest of the stuff seems pretty good. Justin Rhodes, right, this is a guy I looked up, and I don't understand where the fuck this guy came from. Justin Rhodes, okay, so he's working on the RoboCop Return sequel. He's working on Green Lantern for Warner Brothers. I can't see anything on his IMDb or his filmography that makes you go like, oh, give it to this guy. I don't understand. I think he just must know David Goyer or something. Oh, and yeah, speaking of which, David Goyer, who, from what I can tell, is getting most of the credit for this. If you don't know, he's probably is the only. Well, I won't say the only, just in case. I don't remember all his filmography, but the big claim to fame he did was he wrote Batman Begins, and then he got some degree of credit with the rest of the Dark Knight trilogy, but it does really seem like it was Christopher Nolan's steering the ship there, because when you look at the rest of this guy's filmography, it's like every bad comic book movie you can think of, or every really crappy action franchise that never panned out, this guy is behind. So that's not a good sign. I don't know. He's made a lot of bad films in recent years, but they want this to be the start of a trilogy, which don't they always? It never pans out. We'll see. I think, like, we just had a Terminator movie. Like, Genesis was not that long ago, and it was awful. And every Terminator movie has been awful for about 25 years now. It's hard to get excited for this, really, especially since we just had one. I mean, if this one fails, that franchise is just done for. Like, there's no way you can come back after this. Surely. This is like, it's crazy this franchise is going. Anyway, in more James Cameron news, we had talk of another sequel that people possibly don't want, which is Avatar. Which, look, one of the first films I ever reviewed, I wrote a review for Avatar, and I did not like it. I tore into it. But there seems to be some contingent of people that love these movies, or love this movie, I guess. I call it a franchise, but like, we've had one movie in about 12 years, so obviously the vocal majority is saying they don't want this movie, but I'm assuming there must be a silent minority somewhere who's rooting for this movie. I mean, it's the most successful film of all time. I'll just sneeze that, I guess. First of all, they've added new members to the cast. They added Edie Falco, who's of course best known as Carmela Soprano from The Sopranos, and Nurse Jackie. She's going to play a general, because all the humans are either generals in this, really, or soldiers. We also had a very interesting thing. I guess you could call this James Cameron title news, because they're both to do with titles. A couple months ago we had leaked titles that sounded awful, and as it turns out, there's some degree of truth to it. So James Cameron has said that they're confirmed titles. They are genuine, but they're under consideration. So here are our potential titles, okay? Now, if you don't know, they have Avatar 2, 3 are out 2020, 2021. 4 and 5, I think, is 2023 and 2024. I don't remember those off the top of my head. But Avatar 2 is definitely out December. I think the third one is out the following year. So the second one, presumably, next one, is going to be called Avatar: The Way of Water. Okay. If you thought that's bad, buckle up, because the next one, Avatar 3, is called Avatar: The Seed Bearer. Doesn't it just sound like an awful fancy novel? Bring forth the Seed Bearer. Avatar 4, or Avatar: The Tulkun Rider. And Avatar 5, these titles are only going to get worse. Avatar: The Quest for Iwa. Ugh. Those are some ugly ass titles. I hope they don't go with those. Let's call it Avatar 2, man. Come on. The Way of Water. God, that sounds like some real hippie crap, doesn't it? The Seed Bearer. The Tulkun Rider. The Quest for Iwa. The anarchist in me just wants the second Avatar to come out and totally bomb. Like, they have like these 3 films that they're like, oh no, what do we do? That'd be pretty funny. In a weird bit of news that came out during the week, they were saying that Kate Winslet held her breath underwater for 7 minutes filming this. Because they're doing performance capture underwater, which is like, okay. I don't know what to do with that information. It's like when we got that thing of, like, Tom Cruise held his breath for 6 minutes for Mission Impossible 5. You're like, alright. Is the movie any good? No, okay, great. I like good on Kate Winslet, I guess, but anyway. They said the films are going to take place mostly in Pandora. The performance capturing portion of the films for film 2, 3 and 4 are already done. And they're going to start filming live action stuff this spring in New Zealand. As I said, this film is still ages away. The first film isn't going to come out, or it's the second film, I guess. But the first film in this new series isn't going to come out until December 2020. Which is odd. Actually, I'll throw in a little tidbit there as well. With more James Cameron news, and I guess Alien news. I probably should have just linked that way. He did mention, in passing very briefly, and I don't know, is the story being misconveyed a little bit? Someone basically said to him, like, oh, will you ring Neil Blomkamp about doing his Alien reboot? And he was like, oh, I've been talking to him about that. And people were like, oh, he's involved. He's rebooting Alien with Neil Blomkamp. I mean, the rights to this are all going to Disney anyway, so who knows what happens next there. So yeah, Blomkamp's reboot could be back to a certain degree with James Cameron involved. But speaking of movies involving water, and speaking of movies like The Way of Water, we have Aquaman is getting a spin-off. If you saw the movie, there's a part that there's like all these horrific fishmen. We didn't get enough of it. It's actually disappointing. That was what looked really cool in the marketing, but we didn't get much of it. And they're getting a spin-off known as The Trench. Warner Bros. Have kind of begun work on it already. They've hired writers for it. They're going for a horror vibe. The writers, I don't think, have ever written much of note. It's certainly none that was produced. And that's all we really know, is that it's going to be set in the Trench Kingdom. And none of the main cast of Aquaman are going to appear. So, there you go. And they also officially hired a writer for Aquaman 2. Of no surprise that that's getting a sequel, really. And yeah, that's all we have. Aquaman is getting a movie spin-off about the Trench. Let's see. I mean, Warner Bros. Got a lot, and DC got a lot of goodwill with Aquaman from a lot of people. Why are you making this? Like, just concentrate on making good... Like, you're really going to put this ahead of making a Man of Steel sequel? Or any multitude of your heroes, you're going to make an Aquaman spin-off movie without Aquaman. Anyway, there we go. In spin-offs that we might not want, Kingsman prequel. A lot of casting for this movie happened this week. Aaron Taylor Johnson, who of course worked with Matthew Vaughn in Kick-Ass and Kick-Ass, well, not Kick-Ass 2. He only produced that one. Aaron Taylor Johnson has joined the Kingsman prequel, known as Kingsman the Great Game, along with Gemma Arterton and Tom Hollander. This film is set to come out in November. I didn't realise it was actually out so soon. I kind of forgot. And as I was saying, the cast, the confirmed cast I believe we have so far is Daniel Bruhl from Captain America Civil War and Rush, Charles Dance from Game of Thrones, Rhys Ifans, Digimon Hinsu, Stanley Tucci. I think to name just a few of the people involved. So it's got a very impressive cast. And I had heard that this was going to be sort of a period drama as opposed to a spy film with a lot of basis in historical fact and that kind of thing. A sort of a fun caper like that. And what they're saying is that Rhys Ifans is going to be playing a Russian mystic. So, I don't know about you, but that really sounds like he's going to be playing Rasputin. Which is interesting. Definitely increases my excitement for the film somewhat. They've also said shooting has begun for this. I suppose it would have to if it's coming out in November. I think that this could be like a good way to, as a bit of a palate cleanser, because I did not like Kingsman 2. I think that was the same with a lot of people. I think giving us something completely different might help get us on board. I do wonder if they're going to like somehow link characters from this film into the main series, which could be the case, because you know, cryogenic freezing and all the sort of technology, who knows what could happen. They are being a bit guarded with who's playing who. Maybe one of them is a young character from the actual series, who knows. Anyway, in series that are done by Fox and and might have been run into the ground, The Simpsons. In our TV news, where we talk about a few bit of TV news here, Simpsons has been renewed up to season 32, which is another 2 years. It's currently in season 30. It's going to be going for at least another 2 years, people. 32 years. Like, isn't that crazy? Just think about that for a sec. 32 years this film will have this show will have been on the air. It's actually like it must be at the point now where, because obviously my generation and people older than me think of Classic Simpsons as the first 10 seasons, roughly. There's a whole generation of kids now that probably think the classic seasons are in the teens, in the 20s. It's crazy. It's not even the same show anymore. I don't know. It's weird. I guess it's going to outlive us all. I don't even know how you end The Simpsons at this point. I don't know. There was talks that Disney didn't want to particularly renew it, but I think they probably want to see what they can actually do with the rights to Simpsons now that they own Fox, which that'll be interesting. Another quick bit of TV news: MacGruber. They said that a TV series is potentially in the works. I think they said about 8 episodes with the original cast coming back, including Ryan Philippe and Will Forte and who else is in it? Kristen Wiig. Now again, that was they highlighted that it was rough talk. It didn't sound like there was anything firm there, but we shall see how that plays out. The Deadwood movie on HBO was going to air sometime in the spring. I hope that's good, man, because people have been waiting for so long. It would be absolutely fantastic if it actually worked out. Imagine if we just got a whole series of Deadwood movies. That'd be awesome. Anyway. Also at Fox, 24 was having a spin-off in the works. That's no longer in the works. And a 24 prequel, which seemed entirely unnecessary, is also not in the works. I think the 24 franchise is just done for a while. Maybe for good. I don't know. I don't have this written down actually, but I will mention briefly that ABC were saying that they wanted to reboot Lost. I don't know, is that even something worth mentioning? Didn't sound like they talked to J.J. Abrams. It just sounded like some reporter was like, hey, what about Lost? And they were like, we'd love Lost to be back. But I don't think it can really come back on it. I don't know. Remember when everyone thought Super 8 was like a Lost movie? Because it was covered in mystery. Anyway, that doesn't matter. AMC have a bit of news as well. They have cancelled or brought to an end The Sun and Into the Badlands. They're going to end with their next season. Are AMC in trouble? Because it really seems like to me, like as far as the shows go, most of the shows they have, aside from The Walking Dead, don't do great. Better Call Saul does fine, but they can take big gaps, and I gotta imagine that's coming to an end with maybe even its next season. But as far as ratings and reception goes, it seems like they're really on a slide at the moment. But hey, speaking of AMC news, our next story is about The Walking Dead, and we got a whole segment of Walking Dead stuff here, so I grouped it all into one. Right, so a quick bit of news, really simple one. First is that it's been renewed for a 10th season, so it's going to be back next year, and the end of this year, I guess. And yeah, 10 years of Walking Dead, I guess. Doesn't feel like it. Then we had, I will say spoiler for this. I don't think it's a major spoiler because AMC tend to announce this stuff anyway. Like they tend to shout when a cast member is leaving, it's really obvious. But that's that Danai Gurira, who plays Michonne on the show, is apparently going to be leaving. They have not confirmed this yet, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate and true that she's going to leave the show. She'll be in a handful of episodes before maybe being moved to spin-off movies, which have Andrew Lincoln attached, because of course they wrote him off. They were like making a big deal of him. They kind of implied he was going to be killed, and then they just said, hey, no, we'll move him over here and you can do movies every now and then. Lauren Cohen also mentioned that there's a possibility that Maggie might be getting a spin-off, because she has also left the show. Like, just think of the last, like, I stopped watching The Walking Dead a couple of years ago, but look at the people who have left the show in the last while. Michonne is going to be gone. Maggie's gone. Carl they killed off, which his dad was complaining about that really recently again, because Chandler Riggs, who plays Carl, was basically saying to the showrunners, hey, I'm going to buy a house here in Atlanta, I'm not going to be killed off, am I? They're like, no. And he bought the house and he was like, hey, I got a house, and they're like, hey, you're dead. Which is really shitty. What they're saying is that it might have been a case that they possibly had to pay him more because he was becoming an adult as far as age and contracts go. Because I stopped watching the show, as I said, but it sounds like they just gave they did a big time jump and just gave a load of storylines and kind of that plot to another kid actor. Andrew Lincoln is obviously gone as well. There's so few people left in the show to begin with, and it doesn't sound like it's a creative choice. It just sounds like people are like, I'm done. The two people that are holding down the fort there is Melissa McBride and Norman Reedus. They've been on since the start, and they're going to be there for the foreseeable future from the sound of it. What they're saying is that Norman Reedus has signed a contract. I think this was at the end of last year, in November, yeah. Somewhere in the neighbourhood of 50 to 90 million for a multi-year deal that includes spin-offs and standalones. Miss McBride is apparently expected to get 20 million for the same deal. At that time, there was talk that they were trying to get Danny Gurira onto one of these contracts as well, so that Michonne would be around for a while. If I had to guess, speculation, I'll put my speculation hat on. I wear many hats, as you know. I think that she probably said, hey, I've been in Black Panther, I've been in the Avengers, I'm probably going to be in a lot of these Marvel movies going forward, I want a bit more money. And they were like, no. Because AMC is apparently quite a cheap network, and maybe she balked and said, fine, I'll buy. So, yeah, a lot of Walking Dead news there, and not a lot of it positive. I want to see how this show does going forward. It's a really interesting one to watch from afar, seeing kind of how big it was and people turn against it, but it's still a massively successful show. But speaking of horror, if you consider The Walking Dead horror still, we have news of the sequel to last year's Halloween reboot. Scott Teems, who's been working with Blumhouse to adapt some Stephen King novels, I think The Breathing Method was one of them. I think that's a novella he did. He's also adapting Firestarter. He's been hired to write the sequel to Halloween. He apparently gave a treatment and it was very well received there. We don't know much else about this yet, except that the three Strode women, Jamie Lee Curtis, Judy Greer and Andy Matichak, are expected to return. They were obviously the generation of the Strodes who were pivotal to that movie. It hasn't been made clear yet whether David Gordon Green is going to come back. I don't think he'll come back to direct. Doesn't seem like his style to do a horror sequel. He might stay on I'm sure he'll stay on as a producer, and so will Danny McBride. I don't know what their involvement is going to be aside from that. Now, Blumhouse generally works pretty quickly, so who knows? We could get this relatively soon. I would say they'd probably get this together so they can get it out for 2020. But yeah, Halloween sequel's on the way, and it's no surprise after the success of the last one. And that, of course, brings us to... Oh, I linked up my stories again. Not very seamless. I was better last week, but hey, if you have to... Sometimes you have to bend over to make a bridge, you know? I don't know what that means. That was an expression I just made up. It sounds quite filthy, actually. I might have to cut that. But that, of course, brings us to Quick Hits, where we talk about minor stories and to just mock them, make some bad jokes. First up, we have Charlie's Angels. So the internet was a flurry this week. We got our first look at Charlie's Angels. We actually, more specifically, got a behind-the-scene look at the cast, with the director, of course, all Kristen Stewart, Naomi Scott, Elizabeth Banks, and that other actress who, unfortunately, I can't remember her name. So, of course, the internet loved that. The internet was getting excited about pictures of beautiful women. I don't believe it. The Rock has revealed that he was the first choice as an Oscar host, but couldn't take it on because of his Jumanji schedule. Of course, the Academy are put in quite a difficult position with Kevin Hart, and their alternate, I guess their backup option, or maybe even their first choice, was Dwayne Johnson. So what you could really say is that the Academy was between a rock and a hard place. I'm just going to leave a bit of silence there so you can stop applauding. Or so I can edit in cricket sounds. I'll have to see how I get that in the edit. Oreo the raccoon, who served as the visual model for Rocket in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, has passed away after a short illness. Quinta Lela, the farm owner where Oreo lived, said, "Our hearts are broken, as we have lost our best friend, our guardian of the galaxy, Mr. Oreo Raccoon. Oreo passed away in the early hours of this morning after a very short illness. Many thanks to our wonderful vets for their compassion and care. Oreo, you made so many people's lives happy. You've been an amazing ambassador for raccoons everywhere. You loved all people, of all ages, and other animals too, and were never fazed by anything, be it a walk down the red carpet as Rocket Raccoon, a trip to a hospice to visit a sick child, or anything else that came your way. You just enjoyed everything, and it showed. You instinctively knew when to be calm, when to be bouncy, and we never worried that you would do the wrong thing because you never did. You were perfect. It's 10 years since you arrived in our lives. We had that phone call while in the theatre in London to say you had been born, but could we have you now as your mother had no milk? We whizzed back up the motorway. We spent hours trying to get you and your siblings to drink from a bottle. We chose you because you were strong, and took to the formula first, little knowing that you would be such an inspiring animal who would make people from all over the world happy. This is so hard, special little man. We wanted you to live forever, but never as you have been the last few days. Have fun up there over the Rainbow Bridge, my darling. I hope, no I know, they will all love you as much as we do. We will miss you so, so much. Fly high, Oreo, our superhero. Love you lots, like jelly tots. Oh, and Albert Finney died too, but no one cared because he wasn't a fucking raccoon. Anyway, with all that said, with all that sass, we get to our trailer trash. And quite a busy week for trailers, actually. Surprisingly, I expected it to be a bit of a lesser week after the Super Bowl, but there you go. First trailer we had this week, well, first one that popped up on my radar was Shaft. You know, of course, based on, I guess, the blaxploitation franchise. Is that, if that's what you want to call it? With Richard Roundtree originally, they rebooted in the 2000s with Samuel L. Jackson, and this is like a generation of all of them. So there's the Shaft, who was the original. You have the new Shaft, and Samuel L. Jackson's in the middle there. So it's a whole generation. Father, grandfather, and son, that kind of thing. And I know nothing about Shaft. Obviously, I know the theme, you know, damn right. That's all I know about Shaft, really. Haven't seen any of the movies. And it's a lot of fun. I actually really enjoy this trailer. It's more accessible than you might think. And it's got a really fun, light tone. It's sort of a parody. Some people might be a bit annoyed about that because I know the reboot in the 2000s was quite gritty, which I don't think Shaft was ever that initially. Samuel Jackson is really kind of stealing the show in the trailer. He's really the focus. And I don't know if the movie's going to be like that. It probably shouldn't be like that if you want to set up the next generation, but I don't think they particularly want to do that. I don't think they're taking this very seriously as a franchise. But yeah, it looks like it's a lot of fun, comedically, and some fun action. I do think they really make the new kid who's playing Shaft, John Shaft Jr. or John Shaft III or whatever he's called, out to be a total idiot, total dope. So I don't think you can carry forward that franchise with him. So I'm guessing they're just taking a really comedic spin on it. Also, something that's quite odd, and it definitely made my enjoyment of this trailer a bit better, was that internationally, the film is going to be on Netflix 2 weeks after its US debut. So I can't imagine doing great in theaters if people know that. Some people are just going to wait, and other people were just pirated it 2 weeks later. So yeah, that's our trailer for Shaft. Shut the front door. We also got a trailer for Child's Play. I mentioned this last week that we get on Friday. Yeah, people aren't very happy with this trailer, man. Because they've changed Chucky's origin. Of course, the original had him being incorporated by, or a doll basically inhabited by the soul of a killer. And they've changed that now to a kind of a technology gone awry version. Basically Small Soldiers, where it's like a corrupted ship or something along those lines, which definitely makes things a bit less interesting. Although I think there is opportunity here to do a bit more of a parody society and stuff, but I don't know. I think a lot of people are soured on this movie, and I'll explain why in a minute. In the trailer, yeah, I thought it was a bit of a disappointment overall. Aubrey Plaza's playing a mom, which completely blindsided me, because I don't think of her as that age. And obviously, she's the age you can play a mother, but I guess that's just the way Hollywood works. You get your 30s and you're no longer the young female lead, now you're just a mother. And I also found it odd. First of all, it's releasing in summer, which just doesn't seem like a great idea to me. I think this would do a lot better if it was, towards the end of the year, coming into Halloween. But I think they probably have It 2 to compete with there, so they figured maybe that's not the best way to proceed. And another thing is that they didn't really show us a lot of Chucky in the trailer, but it's quite a weird choice to do so, considering there's already promotional shots of what the new Chucky's going to look like. Which, I didn't entirely get it. So one of the reasons I said people are soured on this is the whole ownership of Child's Play and the Chucky franchise. And I'll go into it a little bit here. So there's a long-time producer of the franchise, David Kershaw, and of course the creator of Chucky, Don Mancini. The Chucky franchise is still going. Like they had a movie, was it last year or 2 years ago, that was apparently quite good. And they're still working on stuff. Like they're working on a TV series that's meant to come out. And what he said was, we said no thank you. Obviously this is a talk of, I think it's MGM who approached them. Yeah, it is MGM. Approaching them about being involved with this reboot. He said, we said no thank you because we have our ongoing thriving business with Chucky. Obviously my feelings were hurt, and I did create the character and nurtured our franchise for 3 decades. So when someone says, oh yeah, we would love to have your name in the film, it was hard not to feel like I was being patronised. They just wanted our approval, which I strenuously denied them. Obviously he's working on a TV series with the actual thing, so people might just say, oh, why am I following this TV series which has all this continuity when I can just watch the remake? So the people who are making the movie, they don't know how that's going to affect my livelihood. It's not just a paycheck, it's very personal. MGM screwing with that potentially, so very passionate. I think if there's a hardcore Chucky fans, they probably have very mixed feelings about this. And I think some people are mixed feelings about them changing Chucky in general, but we'll have to see how it does. And maybe I think putting this out in summer might not be a great call either. Definitely not a great reaction online to this trailer, but bringing us to another horror trailer, and that is Pet Sematary. So I have to admit I haven't seen the book or seen the film. I haven't read the book, I should say. I haven't seen the original film. As a trailer, seems like pretty standard horror fare. In my opinion, maybe I'd get more out of it if I was more familiar with the lore of the book and all that. And another thing is, this trailer gives away way too much. Like, I feel like I know everything that's going to happen now, to be quite honest with you, which is a shame. I would say it's quite well edited, and visually it looks quite interesting. So there's that. But yeah, there's another controversy here about them changing it again, just like Child's Play. And it's funny because they actually mentioned Child's Play when they were trying to rationalize their choice. So the original series, they killed the baby. They killed a younger child, the youngest child of the family, I should say, who was kind of a toddler. I think he was around 3. And now they've killed a slightly older child, who's, I believe they said, around the age of 5. So the younger baby child character is still alive. And the filmmaker's explanation for this was that they thought it was good to kind of change from the original film, so it wasn't like people were getting the same thing over and over. And they said that when they were filming the original movie, they used like a doll for stand-in shots, presumably, and that kind of thing for the effects. And he said, we've seen things like Child's Play now, and little kids trying to kill each other, but that using an older child, they'd be able to do things from the book that they couldn't do in the original film. It sounds like, even though it's not going to be true to the original film and the book to a certain degree, it's going to allow them to be more faithful to other aspects of the book that mightn't have been in the original film. So I think that's positive. They certainly, I mean, either they know what they're doing or they expected the backlash, so, or probably both, to be honest. So yeah, they feel like they can really get into the psychological horror of this film with an older kid. So, and our last trailer, the one that everyone's talking about, not for good reason, was the teaser trailer for Aladdin. It's causing an absolute stink on the internet. This was a TV teaser. I think it aired during the Grammys, maybe. It's about a minute long. Oh man, I said this might be a flop. And it mightn't be a flop, but yeah, this definitely didn't help people get on board with this movie at all. Like, let's get it out of the way first of all. The genie looks weird. And there's a lot of reasons why that is the case. First of all, the effects are unfinished. Like, they put out this trailer and the effect is unfinished there. It just looks like they pasted Will Smith's face onto a CGI model, South Park style. They did put out a still that looks slightly better with finished effects. But yeah, it looks really, really weird. It's not even a question of like Uncanny Valley. It's just looks awful. And I've a lot of explanation for this. It would look weird in general, but what a lot of people, I've seen a few people make this point, and I think it's true, is that genie character was so intrinsic to Robin Williams' performance. And when you look at the genie, obviously you hear Robin Williams' voice, but physically there's only minor touches to indicate that Robin Williams is voicing it, but for the large part it's just a character in its own right. And this just feels like, hey, it's Will Smith, and he's playing Will Smith, so it feels like we lost some of the magical aspect, and that could change. Again, let's not judge the whole movie on 5 seconds of footage of Will Smith, but like, yeah, it doesn't look good. People are saying they're laughing and gasping at this. Hopefully it'll look better with finished effects. I mean, he looks like Shrek, which is odd. It's like when they did Shark Tale, they had Will Smith's face in the fish, and it was just creepy. Maybe they can turn it around, but this film is out quite soon. It's out in May, like, so hopefully it just looks better in later trailers. And that's one of the things I haven't seen anyone, or I've seen less people give out about, which I think was a bigger concern, because effects can change, is Jafar. Again, we only get a little bit of him. I don't want to write off the whole actor because of this, but the performance that he gave in that trailer is awful. He sounds just flat. Like, when you listen to Jafar in the originally, it's such a sinister growl of a voice. It was fantastic. And this guy, he just goes, "Bring me the lamp, Aladdin. You know, this'll change the world." What? Dude, Jafar is a badass.
Jafar was a badass.
Yes, he was.
Yeah, he was.
Act like it. Give us a bit more oomph, a bit more anger, and maybe he'll be like that in the rest of the movie. But yeah, this is not a good trailer. I heard, and I'm sure this can be disputed, but apparently it's the most downvoted trailer, or it's had the trailer with the most downvotes compared to upvotes since Ghostbusters. We saw how that play it out. Yeah, this is not looking good. Like, there's big budget moments, but some parts of this look awful. I keep saying awful, but I really... Look, let's say a few positives. Naomi Scott looks great as Jasmine, and I do mean looks great, because there's nothing else to go on. We've just seen her. You know, she looks quite good. She looks fine. Some people are bitching that that they haven't shown her belly button like the cartoon, but, you know, Aladdin's also wearing an undershirt. You can't have it both ways. It's different rules for live action. Don't be weird perverts. And we do get a bit of an action beat at the end, where he's jumping around the lava, which I assume is from the final act, which looked quite interesting. And I think if they have that kind of scale and those sort of visuals, it could really work towards the end. We also got to look at the magic carpet, very, very briefly, with the scene with the genie. And it is very emotive and it looks very accurate to the original, so that's quite cool. Yeah, we don't really have much to go on as far as any of the lead performances. Aladdin or Naomi Scott or the guy playing Jafar, even though what we got wasn't great. But yeah, those effects and the genie is what everyone's taking away from this. Yeah, this film's really got itself... it's really got the deck stacked against it. Because of its own issues, really. I try to hold judgment, but... yeah, you must be very dubious having watched this trailer. Anyway, looking at the box office, okay? Finally, things got a bit of a shake-up this week. We got a few entries. Bit of a surprise for a few things. So, number 6. We'll start with 6 this week because we do have a new entry, which was Prodigy, a horror film. Very low budget. Made 6 million, which you might say, oh, that's not great, but the budget in the movie is 6 million, so anything they make after this is more or less profit. Obviously, that doesn't take marketing into account, but I'm sure they're quite happy with that. And it'll depend how well it does throughout the week. It also has quite a small theatre count, so you know, that's not bad. Glass was in 5th, and The Upside was in 4th. So The Upside is actually, despite having come out first, is managing to pull ahead of Glass, which isn't bashing Glass. It's more that The Upside is just doing fantastically well as far as legs go. And then we have our top 3, which are all new entries. Number 3, we had Liam Neeson's new one. Obviously, Liam Neeson is getting his slings and arrows at the moment because of his comments. Still, the film, despite all that, is apparently overperformed. It made 10 million, and if the word of mouth, though, on the other hand, I've heard is not great. It had quite a bad cinema score, so it mightn't have great legs, but you know, 10 million, it is what it is. What Men Want, that gender swap remake, 19 million, which is great considering the budget was 20 million. It's looking at about a 60 million domestic run, all said and done, assuming its legs aren't bad. And then we had top of the box office, although mightn't feel like much of a winner. A lot is being written about this at the moment. The Lego Movie, the second part, made 34.4 million. And you might say, hey, top the box office, but that is significantly below projections. In fact, people were hoping it would make 55 to 60. So it's at least 20 million below expectations. And a lot of people are analysing this, a lot of questions now. What this means is a question of franchise fatigue. Warner Brothers really did an odd strategy with this, where they released the original Lego Movie in 2014. Then they put out a spin-off, the Lego Batman movie, and then they put off another one, Lego Ninjago, before giving us an actual sequel. Waiting 5 years for a sequel is quite rare, you know, unless you're a Pixar or someone who's given us bona fide classics. But I don't know, it might just be a question where people figured, hey, I don't have to rush out to see this, I can see it when it's on demand, or what have you. But yeah, this is a very significant underperforming. It's actually lower than the opening of the original movie, and lower than the Lego Batman. So a lot of people are saying franchise fatigue, which is not great news for Warner Brothers. Like, I remember a couple of years ago, they were talking about the pillars of Warner Brothers, what those 3 franchises that were going to carry them into the future, and it was DC, Harry Potter, and Lego. And Lego now is in serious trouble from the look of it. Harry Potter underperformed lately, so that's in trouble too. DC is starting to get on the right track, so yeah, there's going to be a lot of questions and a lot of course correcting, I guess, to try to figure out if they can save this franchise. Because I actually saw the Lego Movie, which I'll review in a minute, and it wasn't bad. I definitely don't think it deserves a number that low, but maybe a lot of people just figured, hey, I don't need to see this, I can see this eventually. It's not more worth rushing out for. Anyway, hack headline, as we always do, which is where we give a headline that you might see on a crappy website about the box office. So, hack headline, audiences tell Lego Movie to hit the bricks. Booyah. Oh, that was fun. Okay, let's talk about what we have coming out this week worth watching. The weekly watch. In cinemas, Alita Battle Angel is opening domestically. It is open internationally in a lot of other places right now. I've seen it, we'll talk about it in a bit more detail in a sec. Fighting With My Family is opening it with a limited release. That's the biopic of WWE wrestler Paige. This is getting quite good reviews. Looks like it could be fun. It's produced by The Rock and directed and written by Stephen Merchant, so that might be one I want to see myself actually eventually. Happy Death Day to You. I heard the first one of this wasn't that bad. This is a horror sequel. Haven't heard any reviews for this yet, but I'm sure low budget horror film will do fine. Looking at television, not many things to highlight this week. We have Miracle Workers on TBS. The plot of this sounds really good, but it hasn't got a great reaction so far. So the plot is, while God, who's played by Steve Buscemi, is busy with his hobbies, it's up to low-level angel Craig, played by Daniel Radcliffe, and his fellow angels in the Department of Prayer Response to deal with all humanity's prayers in this comedy series from Simon Rich and based on his book What's in God's Name. Reaction to this has been a little bit mixed. It airs today actually, if you're listening to this when it comes out, the 12th of February on Tuesday. Yeah, it's a shame that the reaction to this isn't great because it does sound quite promising and that is a good cast, but there you have it. On Amazon Prime, we're going to have Lorena, a 4-part documentary on Lorena Bobbitt that's being produced by Jordan Peele. It's going up on Friday. I've heard it's a little bit meandering and drawn out, like there's no need for it to be as long as it is. But you know, if you're looking for a kind of a true crime fix, which a lot of people are these days, that could be one to look up. Netflix, we have a few things to highlight here. The Umbrella Academy is starting on Friday. Heard it's a bit inconsistent, but overall it's quite positive. I'm sure since it's a superhero thing, it'll do quite well. And if you're a fan of Jared Way, I think he created this guy from My Chemical Romance. Larry Charles is Dangerous World of Comedy, 4-part documentary series. Larry Charles, he directed Borat, he worked on Curb Your Enthusiasm and Seinfeld. He travels to some dangerous places or kind of people in difficult circumstances and see how they find comedy out of it or do stand-up, that kind of thing. I watched a trailer for this. It looks like it could be a bit of an uncomfortable watch. But it did look quite interesting. If nothing else, it was hard seeing people in certain circumstances. It seems like it could be a bit dark, a bit comedic though, and I think that's Larry Charles' kind of MO in general. Ken Jeong has a stand-up special, which surprised me. He's not generally a stand-up comedian. I think this is actually his first special, and it's called You Complete Me Ho. So that's coming on Friday if you have any interest in watching Ken Jeong doing stand-up. And finally, I actually added this in after because I nearly forgot. Doom Patrol is airing on DC streaming service. It's called DC Universe, I think. I have to double check that. I've heard really positive things about this, and it has quite an interesting cast, including Brendan Fraser and Timothy Dalton. But yeah, reviews of this have been really positive, so that might be one to check out. DC's streaming service has been, you know, despite the early hiccups of a Titans trailer people didn't like, overall people really seem to have taken to that series, and this one seems to be just as good if not better, so that's a good thing for DC streaming service, certainly. I saw 2 films this week. I've reviewed them on YouTube. I would say if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel and you're a fan of the podcast, you're really missing out. I put out 2 video reviews this week and I have a lot more content planned to go up there. And I'd like to think that the reviews are a bit more insightful, a bit of humour thrown in. No, dare I say, not a bad bloke to look at. But yeah, that's those are up on the YouTube channel, Pop Cult Pod, if you want to have a look at them. So I'm not going to just completely repeat myself here. I'll try to give a more blunt dissection of it, maybe get into spoilers a little bit, but I'll give warning in that case anyway. So first one I saw this week was the Lego Movie 2, the second part. As I said very briefly, I think this is a good movie. It's pretty universally now being seen as a film that isn't as good as the first one, and that is true. But I think we need to remember just how shocking and surprising the first one was. No one expected that to be as good as it was, and I don't think anyone expected that kind of existential ending or that kind of meta humor in it that really, really worked. And I think it's kind of a shame as far as the humor goes in this film. I just did not find it as funny. It is written by Lord Miller again, who did the first one, so I don't know why it isn't as funny. Maybe it just seemed old. Maybe it was my own attitude, but I think the vibe in the cinema I saw it on was the same. Especially someone like the Lego Batman. I thought he was it's a bit of a disappointment because he kind of stole the show in the first one. And he does obviously have his moments. He's just not as funny. And again, it could be the fact that he's now spread thin with the Lego Batman movie out as well. The plot is, pretty straightforward. So what happens is Duke Logan is invading their Lego world, which we saw at the end of the last film. And then it takes a jump 5 years into the future, where we have a kind of this desolate apocalyptic world, which the marketing is really hanging its hat on. It doesn't stay there long, and that's probably a good thing, because I really wasn't into that, to be honest with you. It just didn't really click with me. And what happens is this new character, Princess What I Wanna Be, there's a lot of wordplay in this movie, as you might have guessed, kidnaps basically all of our characters that we might know. Unikitty, was it Metalbeard, like a Batman, Benny the Spaceman, and of course Wildside, Elizabeth Banks' character. And they leave Emmett behind, so Emmett has to go get them. So we have this kind of dueling stories of this is what's happening with Emmett, and a new character, Rex Dangervest, also voiced by Chris Pratt, who's basically a parody of Chris Pratt and how awesome he is, I guess. And the other characters on this new world in the star system, which again, I'm sure you can see the wordplay there. The other point is that Emmett has a vision of Armageddon, where the world is going to end, and all these he sees all his friends being sucked into the kind of abyss, or whatever you want to call it. So as I said, there's two stories. There's also, of course, the underlying story. Since we're now aware of the meta aspects of this universe, there is a lot of allusion to what's going on in the real world, and it's quite obvious to anyone watching. I would wonder how it would play to a kid if they'd understand it completely. It's clearly a whole metaphor about a brother and a sister trying to play with each other and not being able to agree. And of course, with the Armageddon, it's a question of how they can play before Mom has enough of them not being able to play together and ends their play altogether, puts the Lego away or what have you. And I did think the meta aspect was quite sweet and relatable to a certain degree, which is good, because I was wondering how the film was going to handle that, or would it be just like a lesser film might have just ignored the implications of the end of the last movie and forgotten about it. But I'm glad they doubled down, and I do think it's good to have a franchise with I would argue a tiny bit of intelligence. I'm not going to say it's the clever movie, but certainly a step above some of the other kind of crappy kids movies we get. So that's why I'm kind of a bit disappointed seeing how it performed at the box office. I would like to see it carry on, because there is some degree of care and effort put into it. One thing I did like about it, they really doubled down on the music. Of course, the breakout song in the first movie was Everything Is Awesome, so a few new songs in this. We have a villain song, I can't remember the name of it, which Princess What I Want to Be, or What I Wanna Be, I guess, has, and it's a really good twist on a villain song, I should say. And it was funny, and the animation is quite good in that part as well. We have what they're pushing as the Everything Is Awesome kind of sequel or follow-up, but I don't know if that's just a marketing gimmick, which is, oh, this song's going to get stuck inside your head, which it's a pretty awful song, but it is catchy and it does get stuck in your head, which is the intended effect. Obviously, we have Everything's Not Awesome. There we go. I'm slowly remembering these. That's a pretty dour song. It's hilarious in how depressing it was. It got a laugh out of me in that regard. And we also have a song over the credits by The Lonely Island, which was fantastic, but of course it's the credits, so it's got completely overlooked, which is a shame. So it is these dueling stories and this whole telling a story in the background, which is the real world aspect of a brother and sister playing. And my problem, and I think one of the reasons it wasn't as funny with me, was that it was a bit predictable as far as where it's going. Like, since you know the meta implication of it, it's really obvious to see where it's going to end up. And that is sort of a shame. I think it also does that thing that you get in a lot of these sort of movies, where we see what it looks like in the Lego world, where things are big and epic, and then we see what it looks like in the real world, and it's of course less impressive. Did that a few too many times and just got predictable. There was one thing I did like, where there's like a fight between two Lego men in the real world, and it looks like Team America, and they're just bumping into each other, which is quite good. Visually, the film is fine. It looks good. I would say there's parts of it that are a bit less colourful, but certainly a patch above other animated movies. I think like there was a lot of controversy when the first Lego movie came out that it didn't get nominated for Best Animated Film. And obviously it depends when we have the rest of the films for this year, but I don't know if this one deserves to get nominated. The first one certainly, but I don't know about this one. But, we'll have to see. I think it's like when you look at a movie like, say, Spider-Verse that really raised the bar for animation. I think the first Lego movie, you could argue that as well, possibly. This one, a bit less so. So yeah, overall I will say it's a step above most kids' films. It's a good movie. You couldn't regret seeing it. It is a good film. But if you're expecting something that'll be as mind-blowing or maybe transcendent as the first Lego movie, you're going to be disappointed. But it is definitely worth seeing. I would say if your kids want to see this, you wouldn't be ashamed about going to see it with them. I will get a little bit into spoilers, so there's your warning. Spoilers. There's nothing too shocking in this movie, but just in case. One thing I thought was a bit odd is like in the first film we have there's a part where Emmett is in the real world and we see him being able to move around the real world, and that I didn't like that part. In the first film I thought it ruined your immersion a little bit, where it's just like, okay, I got it when he was being moved by a human, but he can also move himself, so I guess it's saying the real world is also magic. And it not only does it double down on that, it really goes crazy. We have a character, the Rex Dangerous character, can just walk around normally in the real world, which really made me go like, huh. I'm not entirely sure what the rules of this world are, but I think maybe I'm overthinking it because it's a kid film. And we of course have the revelation that Rex Dangerfield is actually Emmett after time traveling. But I don't know. That was the sort of element like that. You can go into that and analyze it a lot. So basically, Rex Dangerfield is Emmett, a more grown up, like I could be more awesome version of Emmett. I don't think that would stand up to scrutiny if I overanalyze it, but basically they raise a point in the film and be like, don't overthink it. I don't know. I just thought that was a bit of a weak thing. What I thought the twist was going to be, because we obviously hadn't seen much of the real world at this point. There's a big moment towards the end of the film where we get really into the meta aspects of it. I thought it was going to be that we have the young brother and the young sister, and Rex Dangervest was the older brother who'd maybe come back for the party. And they were basically, like, I used to play and his brother was going to look up to him or whatever. I thought we were going to get a bit soppy about, this older brother lost his childhood. He never had he could never play with his brother or whatever, or he was going to teach some big lesson, but I guess that would have been a bit predictable. I just don't think that the actual resolution of that character, the Rex Dangerous one, was that interesting. I thought it was a bit cheap, and really made me question the logic of the actual universe in it. I don't know, is there much else I need to say as far as spoil? Oh well, there's a cameo I want to talk about that I thought was fantastic, which is Bruce Willis is in this movie for about 10 seconds, but it's a fantastic cameo. So Wildside, I can't remember what the character's real name is. I keep saying Liz, but that's just because it's played by Elizabeth Banks, I think. She's like crawling around the vents and she runs into Bruce Willis and he's like, I just live here. So yeah, there's little Die Hard jokes in it, which is fantastic. I will say I thought the cameos overall were a little bit of a letdown. I think there was more in the first Lego movie, but I don't know maybe it's just because I expected more. We obviously have a lot of the DC characters in this movie. They're voiced. I thought I heard Gal Gadot was going to voice Wonder Woman, but that clearly wasn't her. Cobie Smulders, I guess, came back for Wonder Woman, but most of the rest of them are voiced by or not even the most of the rest of them. I guess only Jason Momoa voices his DC counterpart. And they do have a good joke about Marvel not returning their calls, which I thought was quite funny. But I don't think there's anything else I need to talk about as far as spoilers go in this movie. I would like to see where it goes next. I mean, presumably it's going to do well enough in the long run to warrant a sequel. I think it'd be interesting to see where you go next with the story, because they've obviously incorporated more Lego franchises into this one. They have Lego Friends and Duplo. I wonder if they try and incorporate Bionicle or something like that into this one. I don't know. As I said, good film. Check it out. You wouldn't be disappointed in seeing it. It's not as good as the first film, but few kids' films are, if we're honest. The other movie I saw this week was Alita: Battle Angel. As I said, I've reviewed this on YouTube. I would highly recommend you check it out because I give maybe a more detailed breakdown there. I'm not going to just repeat myself. I'll try to give something unique for both. And I think going forward, the YouTube channel is where I'm going to put reviews. They might be a little bit shorter, but I'll get into it, the spoiler aspects and the more detailed aspects on the podcast. As I said, this movie has been hanging over my head since the start of the podcast. First episode, I said it was going to be a bit huge flop, and it looks like it could be, although I think it did quite well internationally this week. It's not going to do well domestically from the look of it. I'd heard it was good, I'd heard it was bad. And overall, I have to say I actually really, really liked this movie. More than I thought I would. Now, maybe it's just because I expected it to be bad, if you know what I mean. Maybe it's because the bar was so low that I was like, wow, this is great. But I really found myself invested in this movie. As I said, it's not the most original sci-fi film. Feels like a world that we've been in before. Feels like an amalgamation of a lot of sci-fi franchises. And I thought the designs, particularly the designs of the robots, were quite unoriginal. Everything just looks kind of like a weird chrome skeleton kind of thing with a face pasted on it. It looks like Ex Machina. Although I have to keep... I mentioned this on YouTube as well. Ed Screen's Metal Soul patch. I burst out laughing when I saw it. I don't know why. It was just such an odd thing to include. And I think overall, let's talk about the effects and the design. Obviously, what everyone is taking away from this is Alita's eyes. And it is very noticeable, quite obviously. I put the video up on YouTube, and before the review had even debuted, I had it like set to a premiere, so people knew it would come out. There was a page for it, but it hadn't played yet. Someone came into the comics because the thumbnail was me with massive eyes as a joke. And some guy was in the comments saying, like, her eyes are big in the comic too. Like, she has bigger eyes than ever. I'm like, dude, I know. I get it. It's a manga. Okay? Settle down. We all understand you read the book. Doesn't matter. This is a movie. If you read the book, that's great. If you enjoy the book, fantastic. Doesn't change how the movie plays out. I commented to him as well. I'm not just like sneaking away to the podcast and being like, that dude made fun of me on the internet. Yeah, I think the design of Alita, definitely a real uncanny valley kind of thing. Talked about how the skin, especially, and the hair, and even the teeth, a lot of her. And now, again, she's meant to look unnatural because she's a cyborg. But I don't get why they made the creative choice to do that much CGI, because it does look unnerving and unsettling. And the lighting on this movie, there's a lot of bright scenes, and it doesn't look great in natural light, especially when she's next to real life actors, which he normally is. Christoph Waltz was in this movie as well. I thought he was really enjoyable. It was nice to have him, a character that isn't the villain. He got to be a kind of a sincere father figure. It's quite charming, actually. He had a few lines that kind of got a chuckle or two out of me. Rosa Salazar, you know, I was watching the film at the start and I didn't think she was great. She grew into the role, and that might be the intention anyway, because she's meant to be a cyborg that doesn't really know the world and gets in touch with her humanity to a certain degree, so maybe that was an intentional choice. But she definitely grows into the role. Is there anyone else that needs to be pointed out? Oh, Mahershala Ali, as he's the owner of the Motorball League, and he was fine. He was really kind of, I won't say he was chomping the scenery, but he was kind of enjoying it, playing a villain. You could tell, just kind of, he didn't really give a shit, which is fun, you know. He had some cool costume design as well. That was something I was impressed by, and that's not normally something that gets me. And it's not something I expected to get out of this, certainly. Jennifer Connelly is kind of his partner, and I think it's the former wife of Christoph Waltz's character, ex-wife, I guess. Yeah, she was good. She didn't have much to do. I think a lot of characters in this movie suffer from that. They didn't have a lot to do. Jennifer Connelly looks fantastic, by the way. Like, she needs. I wish she was in more movies, because she's fantastic. She's given some of my favorite performances in films in general. Especially like Requiem for a Dream is one that jumps out. So I hope we're starting to see her come into a few more things. The action scenes, obviously, this is a sci-fi movie, so if you expect good science fiction world and you expect good action scenes, the sci-fi aspects, I would say the world is an interesting one. As much as it isn't original, it is a nice kind of combination of all this, and I understood the kind of lore and the history of the world, even though they do leave a couple of spots to fill in there later because they wanted a sequel, obviously. And the action scenes, on the whole, they're quite good. I do think there are a few that are a bit lackluster. The motorball scene, which is something they're really pushing in the marketing, is a little bit of a mess. Overall, it's not awful. It's just there's so much CGI that doesn't look great. It looks kind of like a video game. And the choreography in that scene, it's a little bit muddled. Now it's fine. I've seen much worse. And it wasn't like it was an awful scene. I was into it. I just felt like there was more potential there. Some of the smaller action scenes, there's like a fight scene in a bar and in the sewer, that looked quite good. And one scene that got me really invested was when she's fighting this kind of big. It was Jackie Earle Haley voicing him, apparently. I had no idea. She's fighting this big robot that looks like Chuck Liddell. And I was so into that scene. I was like, come on, Alita. I was finding Alita's side for a second. Then she dropped an F-bomb and I was like, get him, Alita! Yes! I was literally smiling in the cinema, which I didn't expect. But another thing I didn't expect was the ending. And that wasn't because it was a shocking ending. The film just sort of ends bafflingly. I'll talk about it a bit more in spoilers, but it just kind of goes, oh. And I actually heard audibly in the cinema, everyone was just like, huh, it's over. All right, then. I thought this film, for some reason, I must have misread the time, I thought this film was 2 hours, 20 minutes. And it's about 2 hours with credits. It's probably a bit under. Anyway, overall, really enjoyed the movie. A lot more than I thought I would. And it's not deserving of any of the hate it's getting. As much as there is Uncanny Valley stuff and costs a lot of money and sometimes the effects aren't great, I did enjoy this movie a lot. A lot more than I expected to. It's nothing original, but it is quite entertaining and it is a nice little world. It does suffer from a few things, and I think like the ending I said is emblematic of them trying to set up a whole trilogy. I don't think it's the worst case of it. I mentioned The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and The Mummy in the video review I did about setting up a universe where it's like really clearly obvious. I didn't notice it at the time. It's only when it wraps up and there's a few loose threads that you're like, oh, I wish they'd tied those together. But let me get into spoilers, because overall I did enjoy the movie, but there is some things that I want to be like, what the hell? So, spoilers from here on out. There's a cameo at the end of this movie that I literally like sat up out of my seat and like looked at the screen like, what the hell? And that is that our big bad, I think a character named Nova, who hints that like Alita is known from her past life. He's been around that long and he can kind of inhabit the other characters in the movie and some of the robots and sort of possess them. We get a look at him early on in the film, but not really good. He's a guy with white hair and he's kind of got these weird goggles on. And it's played by Edward Norton. And we see him for about 5 seconds. I was like, what the It was like that scene in Deadpool 2 where Brad Pitt is in it for like a couple of seconds. And I was like, and in my head I'm just like, Edward Norton is always complaining about some of the scripts he gets. And I'm like, he was alright with this? That's kind of odd. And then I also read an interview where they said that they tried to make him look like James Cameron. And they did, I guess, but I don't know, is that what that says? That James Cameron is tormenting Alita? Maybe that was why it was in development for so long, I don't know. It was an odd choice, an odd inclusion, and it doesn't look like we're going to get a sequel to this. Honestly, I'm kind of glad to a certain degree, because the way this film ends, right? And obviously this is spoilers, so if you don't want to hear it... Actually, I should probably go back. I can't go directly to the ending thing. So, one thing I thought that was really stupid about this movie was the motorball thing. Because it does that thing where it must think someone in the audience doesn't think we're going to get that scene. And it's not because the trailers is just so obvious, because they keep mentioning and bringing it up and be like, motorball, oh, you'd be really good, and oh, you're never to play battle or motorball or whatever, Alita. And of course, she's going to. And we don't get there till the last act, and when it comes to an end, it's like, oh, okay. It's a fine scene or whatever. It's really obvious that it's going to happen, obviously. Then we have her love interest, who I thought was kind of a pretty uninteresting character. I did like that he wasn't a goody-goody, like a lot of characters these days, like a lot of love interests, but he ends up being killed. So there's a lot of these bounty hunters, these, what do they call it? Like, not monster hunters, stalker hunters, or I can't remember what they name in the movie, hunter stalkers or something, which we go around killing like robots that are kind of rogue, I guess, or whatever you want to call them. He gets killed, but he gets framed for a murder really easily as well. He gets framed for a murder by Ed Skrein's character, like in the most easiest thing ever. Ed Skrein just kills him and he's like, alright, you killed him. And then that's like all the investigation you have to do. It's like 500 years in the future. Is it that easy? I don't know. I'm sure people will be like, but he was a stalker hunter. He was allowed to do that. Or whatever it was. I'm sure that it's definitely not stalker hunter. It's like hunter, I don't know, something. Hunter predator? I don't know. Someone's going to pick me up on that. He gets killed. Alita acts like he's dead, but then brings him to Jennifer Connelly's character to turn him into a robot. And this is the part that baffled me, right? They have this real plot that was really... that's the other thing. The plot of this movie is like nothing. There's so little plot. It just kind of spins its wheels, because Alita's meant to find out who she is. And she doesn't really... It seems like a lot of people do know who she is, but they never really tell her. And after a while, she stops caring from the sound of it. What happens then is they're going to make money, because there's this floating city That it's like, oh, that's where the elite is, and this is where this guy Nova is, and she's hoping she'll get answers there eventually. And they want to make enough money in Motorball to be able to get to that city. So he dies because they have this plan to run away together. Then they bring him to Jennifer Connelly and they turn him to a robot. At which point I think he's possessed or something. And he starts running up these cables to get to the city. And then he just gets killed again. It's like, it seems like a very weird choice to kill him, bring him back for about 5 minutes to kill him off again. Because our character didn't need any more motivation to go up to that city anyway. And he's killed by these like spinning blade thing and that's on the cable that they're running up. That's introduced like a minute beforehand. She has a flashback being like, oh, there's a spinning blade thing here, and then like they're on it, and it's like, oh, spinning blade. So there's no surprise from it, which is also an odd choice. It just seems, I don't get why you would kill him, bring him back to kill him for no real reason when Alita is going to be going up there anyway. And then it kind of like he dies and no one cares because it just looks kind of hilarious because he's like chopped up so much that he basically just drops like an arm and a head. And again, we don't care because we saw him die already, and he's like half a robot now. If there was any emotion impact from his death, it's gone because he already got brought back to life once. And then it jumps like months ahead, where she's the number one person in this motorball league, and the idea is that if you're the number one in the league, you can go to visit this city. And she just points the sword up in the air, and we see Ed Norton looking down at her. So yeah, that's how it ends. That just ends straight away, which is like, there's not a lot of, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of story left there. Presumably she's just going to go up there, battle a few robots and kill him. It feels like he just chopped off the last act of the movie. Anyway, I will say, even though I have a lot of complaints, I did enjoy this movie quite a bit. It's not original. It's enjoyable though. The performances in the whole are good. Some of the action scenes are quite nice. Overall, I would say if you're looking for a movie to see, could do far worse. This is not a bad one at all. Definitely not deserving of all the hate it's getting. So obviously with Alita, we have the most recent attempt to make a big screen manga adaptation in Hollywood. And it doesn't seem like this is one that's cracked it either as far as financially. But I wanted to talk about maybe one that's been in development the longest in our feature on films from development hell. So this is Hellraiser, Akira. Akira is a Japanese anime made in 1988, based on the manga of the same name by Katsuhiro Otomo. It was set in a dystopian future, before most films were, and it was about Tokyo being destroyed by a singularity. And after this we jump to a post-World War III world in a futuristic year, 2019. Yeah, of course, this was said a long time ago, but it's fiction, so that's not too big of an issue. Now we see the world as Neo-Tokyo. Tokyo is a city full of corruption, crime and political unrest, and we follow the character of Shotaro Kaneda, the leader of a biker gang whose friend Tetsuo, after an accident, starts to show telekinetic powers similar to the mysterious Akira who destroyed Tokyo all those years ago. Now I should mention that I hadn't seen Akira before this weekend. I know, it's been on my list forever. I've seen it on list for greatest animated films of all time, greatest films of all time, so I really should have seen it by now. All that said, what did I know going into it? Not a lot. I knew it was anime, of course, and I knew it was a big deal. I knew it was a seminal film for a lot of these. I knew it was based on a manga. I knew the jacket and the bike because of course I'd seen the film cover. I knew it was dystopian, and that was about it. And so I guess that only is what I thought about the movie, and it's not going to be an in-depth review, but I really liked it. I mean, is it a surprise that a film that's this acclaimed and that's stood the test of time this good is that good? The animation is fantastic. It's got some really cool sci-fi elements. The atmosphere is good. It's got a really grungy, futuristic vibe to it. The colour palette works. I like the cyberpunk apocalypse style. The story is a little bit complex, but that's not a detriment to it. It gets you really invested. There's a few kind of strange like parts, like visually, but I think that's just, goes in hand with anime stuff in general at times. If you're alright with anime though, and some things in the medium are a bit, metaphorical or representative, that's totally acceptable anyway. I didn't love the last act, if I had to nitpick, but overall the film is worthy of its reputation. It's quite a good movie. If you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend checking it out. Akira changed the cinematic landscape for a lot of reasons. First of all, it was incredibly influential and original. It helped a lot of trends start in Western and Eastern culture. Something like the cyberpunk genre, particularly in manga. Akira helped inspire Ghost in the Shell and Battle Angel Alita, just to name a few. And it was something of a cornerstone in the cyberpunk genre as a whole, particularly in the world of sci-fi. It helped. As far as animated films, a lot of people consider this to be one of the greatest animated films of all time. And it is a huge boost to the anime genre, particularly outside Japan. People say it opened a lot of doors for anime series abroad and internationally that would appear in the 90s. Something like, say, Pokemon. Anime might have been a bit more niche before something like Akira came out and showed that there was no need for it to be confined just to Japan. When it comes to animation in general, it showed that adult animation didn't have to be crude, it could be mature. Because back then, of course, adult animation in general was very rare, but this had blood, nudity and swearing. It's certainly for adults. While plenty of adult cartoons might exist now, it was incredibly unusual when Akira came out to have something like that. It showed that animation could be mature and not just childish or crudely adult. But the film wasn't restricted to niche genres either. In video games, it's been influential on the works of Hideo Kojima, who often draws on Akira, the Deus Ex games, and the upcoming Cyberpunk 2077. And Hollywood has drawn on it quite a bit as well. Rian Johnson said that Looper took inspiration from Terminator and Akira in particular. Some have highlighted some of the similarities with The Dark Knight. The Batpod surely is reminiscent of the bike from Akira. In fact, a rumour going around at one stage was that Nolan was working on Akira for Warner Brothers, but we'll get to that in a sec. And what was actually funny was I was watching this film, and there was a shot in it that reminded me of Chronicle, the Josh Trank film, and I saw later that he cited that film as an influence as well. Then you can see something almost like a direct homage in Stranger Things with the character of Eleven. And now you have a young child with telekinesis. But that's just a short list to show some of the ways the film and the manga inspired Hollywood. So the question is, with all these accolades and how influential it was, and with studios always looking for the next big thing to adapt, is it any surprise that this film has been on the radar to be remade in live action for a long time? Specifically since 2002? You see, in 2002, Warner Brothers paid a rumoured 7 figures for the rights to a live action adaptation of Akira, and they quickly set to work on developing it. But this development would carry on for over a decade and a half. The earliest incarnation of the film was to be directed by Stephen Norrington and written by James Robinson, who had worked together on the now wrapped but yet to be released League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. So yeah, you might see where this is going. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was seen as a massive failure commercially and critically. I actually don't think it's that bad. You might get to that another day. But the fallout of the film in general was massive. The production of it wasn't fun for either Norrington or for Sean Connery. They clashed quite a bit and argued during filming. In fact, Connery never made a live action film appearance again and retired basically for the most part. And Norrington vowed he was never going to direct another film again. And though he's changed his mind, he still has yet to make another film since League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And regardless, Warner Bros. No doubt were uncomfortable giving what they hoped would be their next big adaptation to a duo who had delivered the disastrous League of Extraordinary Gentlemen for Fox. So the project was put on hold. While we don't know much about Norrington or Robinson or what they had in mind for the property, they did hint at making it more accessible to Western audiences. Whether this meant relocating the story is unclear, but he did suggest that he would make the two leads of Kaneda and Tetsuo brothers, as opposed to friends. Of course, in the wake of League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, Norrington left the project, possibly because he was forced, but this meant that Akira had stalled for the first of many times, and the issue of westernising while adapting it, and even the plot point of Kaneda and Tetsuo being brothers, was something that would haunt most adaptations of this. In 2008, there was talks again of Akira, this time with a relatively unknown Irish filmmaker, Rory Robinson, attached. While quite an odd choice for such an expensive project, Robinson had shown promise as a short film director, especially in sci-fi. One of his shorts, 50% Grey, was even nominated for an Oscar. This time he would work with Gary Whitta, who is now known for his work on The Book of Eli and Rogue One. The goal with this one was to hopefully adapt the manga in 2 parts, with the first to release in 2009. Legendary Pictures was set to co-finance it, with none other than Leonardo DiCaprio to produce through his production company Appian Way. It's kind of from Gary Whitta that we get lots of insights into the project. As a whole, he's actually been quite open about talking about this film. So firstly, he was told not to be afraid to change things, and while this might cause fans hoping for a faithful adaptation to squirm, it was none other than Katsuhiro Otomo, the creator of Akira, and director and writer that advised this. Otomo had said that he must approve any live-action change of the property, but has highlighted that he is completely fine with them doing something new, as he's mostly done with Akira, and he wanted something original and different for the live-action version. However, that potentially troublesome issue of westernising the story again props up, And Wita spoke about the problems while adapting Akira. He spoke to Collider in 2013. And he mentioned how it's hard to figure out how to do it below an R rating. It's a difficult movie, which deals with very mature subject matter. It's hardcore. And with regard to Americanizing it, saying that they're never going to give a $100 million budget to an all-Japanese cast. It became a joke about adding Shia LaBeouf. Of course, fans will be unhappy with this, but for the film to succeed, it needs to appeal to a contingent larger than the fans. So the whole idea was fresh in my head when I was watching this movie. And I thought, how do you westernize this story? And the obvious first solution I came up with was moving from New Tokyo to New York. And Wita had a similar but interesting concept, as he explained. What we did was, the idea is that we've seen a massive economic crash in the United States, and in our desperation, we sold Manhattan Island to the Japanese, who were becoming a very powerful economic force. And they were having an overpopulation problem because Japan is a series of islands. It can only accommodate so many people, so they just bought Manhattan Island and it became the 5th island of Japan, and they populated it. It became New Tokyo, and it was just off the coast of the United States, so it was a Japanese territory. It wasn't New Tokyo, but there are Americans who lived in it, little Americanized quarters of it. I felt it was a way to do a kind of cool Western-Eastern fusion of these two ideas. Not fully Japanese, not fully Westernized. Whether or not we'll ever see that version, I don't know, but I thought that was kind of a cool solution to the problem of Westernization of a Japanese concept. Well, it's certainly an interesting approach to the problem. Westernization is something that has plagued not only Akira, but many manga adaptations. And considering how many writers have tried to tackle Akira, it's unclear if this issue would have ever been used in subsequent drafts. However, one issue that might have affected the development of the project was actually another Warner Bros. Property. You see, around 2008 and 2009, Watchmen had been released, and it had underperformed. And there was a lot of parallels here. It was a dark, R-rated adaptation of an adult comic or manga that had a niche following, that had the destruction of a city integral to the plot. So Warner Bros. Might have seen how something like Watchmen did, and thought something even more obscure like Akira might be a lost cause. We'd had envisioned a 2 or maybe 3-part film that was more true to the manga of Akira rather than the animated film. However, by sometime in 2009, We'd had no longer worked on the project. One aspect that we do see from Roy Robinson's time as director is this concept and tone. Art on the site showed a very faithful adaptation of the manga. It depicted Chris Evans as Kanata and Joseph Gordon-Levitt as Tetsuo. However, perhaps more interesting is Robinson's pitch video, which is often put together to give the impression of the tone and look a director wants from a film. Aside from showing footage of the original anime, Robinson showed Warner Bros. His vision for Akira, a 2-film story that incorporated the scale of a desolate and crime-ravaged New Manhattan, using clips from Blade Runner, Terminator, and A Clockwork Orange to demonstrate a morbid future plagued with gang violence. The clips from the X-Men films and The Matrix to showcase the science fiction and superhero vibe of this film, promising an effects-driven spectacle, and even showed some early visual tests from the movie. On his Vimeo, where Robinson posted this reel in 2015, he stated purists may balk at the New Manhattan in the trailer. This reverted to New Tokyo very soon afterward by the first draft of the script. Unfortunately, they couldn't get the budget under $200 million for that draft, which was a bit rich for what was proposed as an R-rated movie with no stars. It seems these problems of westernization, budget, and rating will consistently plague an Akira adaptation. By the start of the 2010s, Robinson had left, and the directors of the Book of Eli, the Hughes brothers, Albert and Alan, had boarded the project, working still off a draft from Wita, who had written the Book of Eli. However, all this changed quite quickly. Albert would now be the sole director of the project as Alan stepped away, and 2 new writers, Mark Ferguson and Hawk Ostby, possibly best known for their work on Iron Man, Children of Men, and currently The Expanse, were given the job of rewriting Wita's draft for a more PG-13 rating. A few more writers had some input, and some things were looking better than they ever have for Akira. However, 2011 saw lots of issues arise with the movie. Firstly, the script for the film leaked online, and while it wasn't clear whose version of the script it was, the reaction was negative. While an alleged review of an earlier script was praised for being quite faithful, this one seems to have deviated quite a bit. Later versions would change the character of Tetsuo to Travis, but this film more notably had a rather boring inclusion of our characters being rebels against an evil corporation known as the Foundation. They have a vague motive of causing destruction that will force people to buy products and make them money. Presumably they would be a replacement for the secret government department from the original film. One of the biggest issues this script has was the inclusion of some heavy-handed allusions to 9/11. You see, adapting Akira from a cultural perspective is more difficult than most. Its place lies very much in Japanese history, taking influence from the nuclear bombings of Japan, their involvement in World War II, and the gross experimentation and research conduction by World War II scientists, notably in Unit 731. And while we can point to something like Godzilla as being an analogy for post-war Japan and the subsequent bombing, it has become such a long-running franchise that has somewhat moved away from its nuclear origin. But with Akira, it's intrinsically tied to those factors. Plugging that gap with the 9/11 metaphor seemed like a cheap way of making it relatable to a Western culture, but it was clumsily done, and especially with a tragedy so recent, it came off as manipulative. And that's not to say it can't be adapted for a different cultural climate, but it needs to be done with care and subtlety, and that was not the case with this script. Kaneda and Tetsuo are still brothers in this draft, with Tetsuo struggling with drug addiction, and it's a very soap opera style in their dynamic. The dialogue reflects that too. There's a real strong love theme throughout, which isn't really as blatant in the original, but the other issue is that the love was stronger before, as it came from two childhood friends, and not just the love expected between siblings. It made their bond a lot stronger. Akira is one of the biggest changes though. In the original, Akira is a victim of experimentation, and a mysterious powerful being is changed to a more simple villain and murderous creepy child. Think psychotic horror child, that standard cliche. Here's an actual excerpt. The little boy looks up, his hair standing on end, emitting a gentle pulse of static electricity. As he begins to hum a slow, haunting version of Frere Jacques, it chills to the bone. Well, that sounds original, right? The film was also accused of misogyny, where the female character of Kai, who in the anime was a strong, tough character, had a real understated romance plot with Kaneda, and that kind of got stripped down, and I mean that very literally. A lot of her time she's wearing sexy outfits or being ogled by other characters, and they really made her character a lot more useless. They also changed the ending, which was very poorly received by fans. The script in general was just not liked. Even actor Toby Kebbell, who was considered for the project, attacked the script after the fact, especially the point about turning Kaneda and Tetsuo into brothers. He gave a very well-informed breakdown of some of the issues, firstly mentioning that Warner Bros. Were making the mistake of trying to adapt the anime instead of the manga, and when you're trying to make a franchise, it would make a lot more sense to adapt the manga, which is massive. But he also highlighted the point of why turning Tetsuo and Kaneda into brothers was an issue. He said, "The point is that Tetsuo can't comprehend how someone who isn't his brother could love him so much, and that's where his wrath and his rage come from. Do you not see that? Why have you made them brothers? What the fuck are you doing?" Despite getting a rewrite by Steve Kloves at quite an expense, who's best known for his work on the Harry Potter series, and casting beginning, controversy erupted again over whitewashing. The studio were looking at Robert Pattinson, Andrew Garfield and James McAvoy for the role of Tetsuo, while Kaneda was possibly a role for Garrett Hedlund, Michael Fassbender, Chris Pine, Justin Timberlake and Joaquin Phoenix. And it's quite humorous to think that Robert Pattinson, Andrew Garfield or James McAvoy could be playing a character named Tetsuo. There was also a rumour that Keanu Reeves was being considered, but the idea was that the two leads were going to come from those group of actors. Albert Hughes left the project in May 2011, and they still intended to get the film moving by the end of 2011 or the start of 2012. At this point, French director Jean Collet-Serra, known for his recent Liam Neeson action movies including Non-Stop, Unknown and The Commuter, was hired to direct the movie that summer. He again pointed out that it shouldn't be a direct adaptation of the anime, going so far as to say that in the original, the characters aren't interesting. They're two-dimensional and people only care because stuff happens to them, saying that the characters of Japanese culture are never strong, and they are more a way of pushing a philosophy forward. Despite this possibly controversial outlook, by the end of 2011, it looked like the film was ready to go, with most of the cast in place, and additional casting had just begun. It was at this point that we got a rumoured plot synopsis for the movie. Kaneda, played by Garrett Hedlund, is a bar owner in Neo Manhattan, who is stunned when his brother Tetsuo is abducted by government agents led by the Colonel, intended to be played by Gary Oldman. Desperate to get his brother back, Kaneda agrees to join with Kai Reed, Kristen Stewart, and her underground movement, who are intent on revealing to the world that truly happened in New York City 30 years ago when it was destroyed. Kaneda believes their theories to be ludicrous, but after finding his brother again, is shocked when he displays telekinetic powers. Kai believes Tetsuo is heading to release a young boy, Akira, who is taking control of Tetsuo's mind. Kaneda clashes with the Colonel's troops on his way to stop Tetsuo from releasing Akira, but arrives too late. Akira soon emerges from his prison courtesy of Tetsuo as Kaneda races in to save his brother before Akira once again destroys Manhattan Island, as he did 30 years ago. However, the issue of whitewashing was still ever present, and you could argue that in today's culture it would be an even louder chorus against it. Gary Oldman was seemingly replaced by Ken Watanabe as something of a token casting of a Japanese actor, yet most of the principal cast was still noticeably not Asian. Then, on January 5th, 2012, Boris Kitt of The Hollywood Reporter reported that Akira production offices had been shut down and talent and crew were being sent home. Warner's main concern seemed to be threefold. One, they felt that the cast was an issue, possibly due to all the whitewashing controversy. Two, the script they felt was an issue. They gave producers, the director, and possibly the writer 2 weeks to iron out the script. And three, possibly most notably, was the budget. The budget had long been an issue for the project. It requires a massive special effects budget, and no doubt needs some big name talent to draw in newcomers. While the days of a $200 million budget for the film were long gone, Colette Serra had actually managed to make it a budget of $90 million, but Warner Brothers still wanted something less, something in the range of 60 to 70. With all these concerns, Akira was shut down. This is actually the closest the film ever came to being made, having been greenlit and seemingly gearing up for production. Colette Serra would return to the project, however, in 2013. Despite Warner looking for a low-budget filmmaker in between, they were keen on Colette Serra's vision. They also apparently found a way to work the budget, and the hope was that they could start production in spring 2014. Then again, this is of course about development hell, so it never materialised. Despite hoping that Akira would be his next project after Non-Stop, it didn't work out, and by 2015 it seemed his hope for the project was lost, as no progress had been made, and he said it's a Warner Brothers question. Since then, it's been almost a tradition that any successful writer or director in the industry, especially ones with a connection to Warner Brothers, is rumoured for the project. George Miller apparently turned down the film after making a successful film in Fury Road. Christopher Nolan was rumoured to be producing a trilogy in 2016. They looked at Justin Lin. After the success of Get Out in 2017, Jordan Peele turned it down apparently, citing the need for a bigger budget, but mentioned he'd prefer to do something original. And most recently, Taika Waititi was mentioned as a director. And while he hasn't been confirmed, he has confirmed that there was talks. He did seem to address a lot of his complaints, if he was to make the movie, and that he wanted to adapt the books, not the movie, even though he did say he loves both. He wanted to cast untapped Asian actors, and recognise the whitewashing controversy. He seems to understand the problems that have plagued other efforts from a narrative and casting standpoint. However, unfortunately, studio politics and production costs in general will always be an issue, and there's no clear answer on how to get Akira made peacefully and profitably. Sure, you can cast Asian actors, which you rightfully should. It's a Japanese property, with Japan being close to the themes and narrative of the manga and anime. Yet there is an argument to be made that Western audiences might not go see a film with unknown actors. Not that having Scarlett Johansson helped Ghost in the Shell any bit. And the other issue is that Akira is a difficult property to adapt because a faithful adaptation would be high budget and R-rated, which cuts into profits even more. And if you go to the opposite route and make it cheaper and more sanitized, you lose some of what makes it special. Regardless, it's a project that has long circled Hollywood, courting some of the hottest names in the industry. Actors, writers, directors, off some of the biggest projects, still can't crack the code of how to make Akira work. Or they have, and the studio doesn't want to make a big budget version that is faithful to the property because it has less marquee appeal. An Akira live action adaptation has been brewing for 17 years now, with no end in sight. And while the animated version gets older and shows no sign of actually aging, the question is whether we need a live action version, or if, considering the amount of production and development costs so far, whether it can ever truly be worth it from a financial standpoint. Akira has inspired a generation of filmmakers and fans to create their own properties, from the likes of The Matrix to Alita Battle Angel. While its inspiration might continue to reverberate through Hollywood, it seems the closest we get to an Akira film is in the properties it inspires. With things unlikely to change anytime soon, Akira will remain in development hell. It's our feature this week. Hellraiser, Akira. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm hoping to do a few more Hellraisers in the future. If you have any suggestions, you can get in touch with the podcast, because that's our show this week. You can get in touch by email, popcultpod@gmail.com, on Facebook, popcultcompound, on Instagram, popcultpod, all one word, on Twitter, pop_cult_pod. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, like, give us a positive review if you can. Also, I would highly recommend you check out the YouTube channel. There is some video reviews that are different from what you heard in the pod. I'm going to put a video version of the pod up, hopefully by Thursday. And I'm also going to start doing a few exclusively YouTube sort of features. So there's a lot coming to YouTube in the future. I'd recommend you check it out. Just search Pop Cult Pod and find us there. And that's our show this week. Next week, we have the Oscar special. I'm going to review all the best pictures nominated this year, and I'm also going to recommend maybe a few recommendations of what should have been nominated. So that's our show. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you back. With that said, I'll see you next Tuesday.